My son lost control. The neighborhood were in fear of what he might do to me.
A victim doesn't want to be a victim. It's nearly destroyed me at a time in life when I should be concerned about retirement.
I am on Social Security, and that's it, my income. And he took it all. Well, I didn't report it. You don't brag about being weak.
Elder abuse is a hidden problem. We have victims who are truly isolated in every way. And those of us that are in people's home have the ability to break that silence, have an ability to broach that isolation, and to reach out to those victims, sometimes for the first time.
Elder abuse is mistreatment of older adults. It can take many forms. It can take the form of financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual assault. It can be neglect.
70 to 90% of the perpetrators of elder abuse are family members, loved ones, or caregivers. It's someone who's very important to this older victim.
Community corrections is in a fairly unique position of being able to prevent elder abuse. That's not a role that a lot of other agencies, even other criminal justice agencies, get to play very often.
We've got long-term exposure to the family dynamics, unlike any other member of the court family, unlike any other member in the criminal justice system. So if it can be exposed, we've got a better chance than any other form.
Elder abuse victims in our society rely a lot on outsiders to report the abuse that is occurring to them. They may be threatened by the perpetrator, they may not have opportunities to report, and so it becomes a responsibility of all of us in the community to be the eyes and ears for the criminal justice system when we have contact with elders.
Almost every state has a mandated reporting statute, and the way most of them are written is that you just need to suspect. Suspect that someone's being abused, neglected, or exploited. It's not going to be more paperwork. Mandatory reporting is simply picking up the phone and making a call.
Not only do we need to address it from an ethical standpoint to protect this potential victim, but there's a legal obligation to report it.
Our board of directors felt that this was an important enough topic that they passed a resolution in support of probation and parole officers getting training and putting into practice those tools that recognize and respond to elder abuse.
Hello, my name is Agent Brown. I'm here for your house visit and your interview.
When it comes to elder abuse, professionals may think, well, that's a social service issue. But what they don't realize is that very often in their work with a particular offender, they may come in contact with elder abuse.
If you look at the profile of the abuser, it fits almost to the T the majority of the cases on our caseloads as probation officers. If you have an offender who just came out of prison, they don't have assets, they don't have any money, which usually results in them going to the mom or grandma's house.
And we're in a situation where we're going to be, if not making a placement to those homes, at least in a position to observe their placement in that home.
The elderly people are going to be nervous about someone who has a criminal record coming and living with them, but they may feel obligated to because they're family.
And I think we really need to check with that person to see if it's okay, if this offender resides with them, if they have any concerns, do they know what the sentence is, do they know what the requirements are, and who's going to pay for what and what the financial responsibilities are. When we place chemically dependent offenders in homes with seniors on meds, what does that mean? What kinds of meds might be available? How could that be both an impediment to recovery for a probationer, and how might this elder be harmed?
Community corrections can play a role in making sure that the perpetrators who they are supervising don't get encouraged to work in settings where they should not be working. For example, long-term care facilities, nursing homes.
You just want to be sure that if they're on your caseload for battering a parent or a spouse or anyone, that they are not working in a field that they're providing care for the elderly or somebody that's vulnerable. It's extremely important that community corrections, the probation department and parole agents know about elder abuse because it's only going to increase. 34 million Americans are over age 65, and with the baby boom generation, it's going to be larger. This is going to be a huge impact on our society.
Community corrections needs to pay attention to every sign of abuse and know where to report it.
And if you know what you're looking for, it's not all that difficult to spot. If you've got several generations in the house, see how people, if you're there for any length of time, see how people behave. Are there people who don't want to talk to you? Are there people who disappear in the bedroom?
It's basically the living room area. When we do a home visit, we can note the surroundings, note whether or not the elder looks to be in good shape. Is there neglect? Are there indicators that abuse may have occurred?
Neglect is the most common. It's the one that probation officers are going to see more often. That would be a home visit where you see an elderly person who does not have the appropriate clothing on. If you look at food scattered around the house, the smell from rotten food, it could be smell from bodily fluids. That should cause red flags to go up for an officer.
I think too often we assume, well, they're just old. They're just old, and that's why they look like this. When in fact, something that should be in our minds is this might be the result of neglect or mistreatment.
Some victims don't really realize that they're being abused. You know, especially victims confined to their beds. There are cases that I've seen where a person is covered with bed sores, you know, where a person with dementia is shaken or tied to a wheelchair because the drug-addicted son or daughter or mentally ill son or daughter cannot cope with them.
If you're seeing bruising, let the expert make a decision on if this is coming from bumping into furniture or possibly from some other source. It's suspected abuse, and it's imperative that we report that to Adult Protective Services.
There's also emotional and psychological abuse, and some of those indicators might be a confusion on the part of a senior, or depression, self-blame. He may be telling her that she's crazy or that she's developing dementia, and that's generally what a batterer does. They take away the self-esteem of the elder parent, make them feel that they can't do anything for themselves.
I've seen older adults who've been given narcotic medicines, other people's narcotic medicines, to make them very confused so that they start signing checks over. Under medication is also a form of abuse. I won't give you your pain medicine unless you sign this.
Indicators of financial abuse are many. They can include a person not knowing what's going on with their finances when they have somebody else who's in control of those finances and who just is not clearly indicating to the person how the money is being used.
All of a sudden the bills aren't being paid, electricity's been turned off, those kinds of obvious things where there's no food there because they can't afford it, or they're not taking their medication because they can't afford it because somebody's taking their money.
Who do you reside with?
I reside with my parents, my mother and father.
Your mother and father?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a situation where a defendant is sitting in our office and they come in with their restitution payment. They're paying their probation fees. They got expensive clothes that we know that they couldn't afford because they're not working. How does this all happen?
Let's be sure that he's gainfully employed. Let's make sure that he's being held accountable to work and pay these fines and fees. The victim doesn't have to bear that burden as well.
You're gonna have to see me once in the office and once in the field, all right? And you're gonna drug test twice a week.
We have a real obligation to promote victim safety. If you have an offender with chemical health issues, enforcing those conditions around chemical health is only going to enhance the safety and the well-being of the people around that offender.
These adult children will probably always be in their life. We have to do all we can to try and stop the cycle of violence.
Older victims are a specialized group, and it's a group that often doesn't complain. One of the challenges that we have is they don't come forward when they're victims.
When you get one of these cases, you go, oh, gee, I can't work my standard routine with these cases because I have to contact victims. So if this goes to a regular officer who maybe has 125 cases, chances are that this case is going to be put on the back burner simply because it's unfamiliar territory.
The easiest thing any of us can do is turn our back and enroll the victim. Because we're busy, we didn't see the clues, people want to live that way, I didn't get the appropriate response, they're not talking to me. We need to go in and assess the situation.
I've interviewed women in their 80s and 90s who have just said to me, I can't believe my own grandson has done this to me.
We'll look out for your best behalf on that standpoint.
They love the perpetrator that's abusing them, and they just want this individual to get help, but they do not necessarily want them to be locked up.
He wanted $50, and I didn't give him $50. I gave him a check, and I don't know what he did with it.
Very often, older adults are very concerned that if somebody knows that something bad happened, they will be taken away from their home, that they'll be put in a nursing home. Really, a lot of fears around losing independence. So it's important to address that fear quickly, which is, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you stay independent. We just want to make sure that your safety is being protected.
Wanted to ask you a few questions. How's your health doing? Is everything okay welfare-wise?
Welfare-wise, it's pretty good.
If the victim is living with the perpetrator, it's important for the probation officer to interview them separately in a safe situation so that they can divulge more freely if there's any elements of abuse.
Ask them, is it okay if I talked with you now? If they say no, then say, what would make you feel safe, or when is a good time to speak with you?
Asking simple questions instead of a long, complicated question that requires a lot of cognitive ability to follow. You might just want to say something like, has anybody hurt you?
If you've given that person more alternatives, if you've given them advice, if you've given them a place to turn, that's a powerful thing. When that person needs you because you've been non-judgmental, you've taken time to say, I'm concerned about you, most people don't live this way, they're more apt to reach out in the future.
It's important for community corrections officials to know what their state law is regarding reporting and whether they're covered under it and whether they are a mandatory reporter or a voluntary reporter. If they suspect that something is going on, then they need to consider making reports to their supervisors, as well as looking at whether their state law requires them to make reports to any other type of agency, and that might include Adult Protective Services, or it might also be another law enforcement agency.
So the threshold for reporting is very, very low, and it's developed that way because you may be in a situation that the officers should report it because something isn't right. And then when they come to the attention of Adult Protective Services, we can do our assessment.
As a senior social worker, my job entails that I respond to reports that we receive through the Adult Protective Services Registry, and I go out and assess if there's any abuse or neglect to dependent adults as well as seniors.
As probation officers, we're not required to investigate situations of elder abuse or to provide services to elders, but we should and can very readily share information with those who can step in and do that.
But whether a probation officer is calling law enforcement or other community police officers calling us, we would approach that the same way. But we can report back and say, look, we've been to the home, we've seen this person, this is what we're seeing. And often I will let that person know, or our caseworkers or supervisors will let the person know that, look, we've tried to connect with this resource and that resource. So now we have an extra set of eyes, and those officers have another set of resources to turn to some of these cases over to.
We have 5 new cases today. Multidisciplinary teams, I think, become particularly important in cases of elder abuse because these cases are often multidimensional, very complex.
And it is very apparent that this is criminal negligence
We have adult protective services. We have community services through Victim Witness. We have a forensic team that at UCI, which is our county hospital. We have a forensic specialist in bruising. We have the financial abuse team. We have judges on board who assign protective orders, who know about conservatorship.
We all educate each other so that we know enough about each other's disciplines to be helpful to each other. We all feel like we're doing a better job, and we're able to do our jobs more quickly.
I realize that I don't have to reinvent the wheel, that I take care of the criminal justice part with the offender accountability, and that I can count on a trustworthy collaborative to take care of the other needs of the victim.
Having the collaborative opens the door to resources that we in probation may not even be aware of. So the collaborative is so important because at that point, it's like you're almost a resource broker. You can ensure the victim's needs are being taken care of by the experts at any community resource. They can assess the victim. Their expertise is really needed in that arena. That frees us up to focus on the probationer. That way we can do our job.
Sometimes it may be overwhelming, sometimes it may be maddening, but if you begin to screen and assess for elder abuse, you will save someone's life. I guarantee you will save someone's life.